Good afternoon. It's Monday night in the city. It's 8 o'clock. Well, it's a little after 8 o'clock tonight. It's Dialogue with Dozell. It's a hot button Monday. We got a hot button conversation to share with you tonight. It'll only be hot button if you weigh in. We need your comments. You drive the dialogue tonight. Hey, KV is going to be away from us for a few weeks. He's on assignments and never without a loss for a roadie. Riding shotgun tonight is my sister in broadcasting, my cousin in real life, Janice Hazel. Jan, how you doing tonight?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for inviting me. So good to be back with you all. We're starting to get warm here in Detroit. We were about 61 degrees today, so people were walking around half naked.
Well, Jan, I got to tell you, I've done like three different temperatures over the last week, and I got back in Jacksonville after being way up north, up around the vineyard and so forth yesterday, and it was actually cold in Jacksonville at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's like 39, 41 degrees, and then I walked out with all of these amazingly warm clothes on, and it gotten up to 70-some degrees. So when I got back home late last night or this morning, before I walked out this morning, looked at the temperature. It said 72 degrees. But before I donned my short pants and my short sleeve and no long johns and all of that stuff, I had to go out and see for myself. So I just took a little walk, just enjoying being in warm weather again. But 60, I know that's like a heat wave in the deep.
Oh, yes, it is for April because, we can still get snow. In fact, it was snowing Saturday over the weekend, and then it melted. But we can get snow all the way into May. So it's just, whatever will be, will be.
Yeah, just glad to be around the experience at this point in the game. So
yeah.
Tonight's show is dedicated to the memory of Dwayne Haskins. Dwayne is a 24-year-old young man, and he was going to be vying for the starting position as a quarterback at my favorite team, Pittsburgh Steelers. And unfortunately, he met an I won't say untimely, but he met a horrible fate right here on 595 in Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood area on Saturday, where he was hit by a dump truck. And our love, our prayers go out to his family. He had a young bride, his family, his parents. It goes out to every Pittsburgh Steelers fan, every football fan, and every sports fan. It's time like this that we put colors and all that to the side. We don't care if you are brown and orange, or if you are blue and red, if black and gold is the Steelers. We're all one family, and our heart goes out to him. And I think Jan will just take off by kind of respectfully discussing his death. I was getting text earlier as I just came in for a brisk walk, and coach I coach high school football, and we have we call it the clown line. The guys go back and forth, and a banner saying that the speculation. I know the Florida Highway Patrol. I was monitoring this from a distance, started out in New York and then through the district, and thought about you while we were up there, and then on down through Virginia and so forth. And it really ruined my weekend. Had it not been for the beautiful girl at my side, it would have been a tough weekend by hearing about that. And the speculation is that they're speculating two possible causes of death. One is suicide, I'm understanding, and I haven't looked at the latest from the news media. And the other is, and this came out in the very beginning, possibly there was flocka or some other kind of drug involved. So just a real tragedy. Young man started his career in the NFL with the Washington football team during his tenure, and last year was traded over to the Steelers, and this year had an opportunity to vie possibly even for the starting position with Ben Roethlisberger having retired. And they were down here. He and several of the running backs, quarterbacks were down here on a bonding exercise and doing some preseason workouts. And just, had you heard anything about that? Or have you heard any updates on his situation?
I have not heard any updates on it. What you stated is all that I've seen in media reports, news reports. So, needless to say, the medical examiner will get to the bottom of it and render their decision. It's so sad to hear that there might have been suicide, but as we know, during these last 2 years of the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of people have experienced mental health challenges and have not gotten the assistance that they could have, either through their pastor of their religious affiliation, or social worker, or psychologist, or psychiatrist. People are not reaching out, particularly not in the Black community. And that's something we need to really straighten out, because there's nothing wrong asking for help. If you don't know how to rewire your ceiling fan, you call an electrician. Same thing. If your mind and body and soul needs a little rewiring, then call the appropriate technical professional to help you through it. Sometimes that third party is better than talking to a relative or friend who is your cheerleader and knows all about you and doesn't want to accept what you might be telling them.
Well, unfortunately, that has really hit our community, and it's a tragedy when it hits anyone, when a person gives up hope on life and resorts to that. And just for the record, we're not saying that. We're just really kind of delving into the new speculation that out there. Adam Scheffler, who is the A1 reporter for the NFL for ESPN, apparently must have made what turned out to be a premature speculation or statement. And I see where he has apologized. I haven't had an opportunity to delve into what it was that he speculated. But Haskins had a few problems his first year in the league, and it was basically the performance just wasn't what he had done at Ohio State, and he quickly lost his starting position in Washington, and Pittsburgh was a fresh new start, and from every indication, it was a great start. He was a very positive force in the locker room, and the fact that he was down here on primarily a positional bonding time away from Pittsburgh in their off the field training, it just kind of does not lend to suicide. And Lord knows I would hate to think that he was involved. They were saying he ran a 4.2. There's no way he would have gone out in front of it. 595 is like, I don't know, Interstate 5 in Los Angeles in rush hour traffic. And that's like that almost all the time. And I just couldn't imagine for any reason he would try to walk from one side to the other or underestimate a car's speed. So we'll look at that further. But did you mention that I want to talk about the issue of suicide and what causes the despair that one takes their life and the effect that it has on family members. And again, just a disclaimer: this has absolutely nothing to do with the sad, tragic death of Dwayne Haskins. But we're just talking about that as a whole. Jim, what have you known or what have you learned about individuals that you actually known or families that have been impacted in our community by suicide of recent?
Well, I don't know anyone who has committed suicide, and I don't know any families intimately that have experienced a loved one who has committed suicide. So I can't speak from an intimate perspective, but I can speak from individuals who talk about it, and I've read about it, and I have a close relationship with a few people who are clinical psychologists and or psychiatrists, and they talk about the increase of suicide and real depression, mental health issues for the Black community that goes untreated and that goes unacknowledged. There's a wonderful commercial out right now that I've been seeing in the Detroit market. I imagine it's nationwide, and it's about a Black guy and possibly a Hispanic man, possibly Middle Eastern. I don't know the ethnicity, but the Black guy is he's working his abs and his chest muscles in a fitness center on equipment. And the other guy, who might be Hispanic, he's bench pressing. It looks like he's got like 100 pounds on each side of um, his weight, and he gets stuck. And the black guy who's working on a machine, he hears him kind of sigh, and he goes back immediately and says, "Hey man, you need some help?" And the guy who's trying to bench press, which can't get the weight up off of his chest, it looks like 200-pound weights on each side. He says, "No, I'm fine." And it's a wonderful analogy to mental health. You know, if you're in a fitness center or the gym weightlifting and you overestimated your ability to lift 200 pounds dead weight, or maybe 500 pounds dead weight, even if you're a competitor, uh, there's no shame in asking someone to assist you to lift it up, or definitely get it up off of your chest if you can't get it up. Same thing goes for mental health. If you are experiencing a problem, a challenge, a job loss, loss of a family member, whether they died or whether they exited your life, changes to your lifestyle, possibly a divorce, um, not not doing or excelling the way that you thought you might, like this young man, Haskins. All of those are reasons to check in with a mental health professional. We saw last year a number of our very famous and very accomplished uh, athletes, professional athletes, say, "I need a mental health break." You know, that is incredible to be competing at the professional level. And so many young people go into it unprepared. And so, with the instant fame, particularly if they're very successful. And so, you know, I think that everyone should always have in their back pocket 800-273-8255, which is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And there are different hotlines in various cities, but that's the national line. It's 24/7 available to talk to someone. And there's also cyber online programs that you can contact. I think one of our Olympic gymnasts, she's a spokesperson for a virtual mental health program that you can check in with her mental health professional on the road. And those are things that we can do. You can do that in the privacy of your home or the privacy of your car, but we should check in. I was traumatized by something over a decade ago, and it was affecting my sleep pattern. And I, you know, talked to my primary care physician, and she immediately started doling out medication. Well, I didn't want to take medication. I knew there was something wrong, and it was something to do with the trauma that I sustained. And I went to see a mental health professional, psychologist at Georgetown University, someone who was completely out of my circle, was recommended to me by someone, by a colleague. And this happened to be a white male from South Carolina, so a white male Southerner. I'm a Black woman, a Northerner. Couldn't have been further away from my experience. And we had a great rapport because, once again, he was not judgmental, he was not in my circle. And so he could talk with me without perhaps guiding the conversation. And it was great. And I was able to get through that situation with flying colors. And I wanted to continue, but I really only needed it for a particular period of time. So I have no problems talking about having seen a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. I'm not one who wants to take medication. So it was talk therapy. And he said to me that I was an anomaly because typically it takes people sometimes 6 to 10 months to just acknowledge they have a problem. Something's different in their life. And then for Black Americans, it takes years typically for a Black American, male or female, to reach out to see a mental health professional. And he said, you know, you sustained this traumatic experience, and you know, you reached out within the first 3 months. Well, yeah, I was waking up at 4 a.m. every morning. My sleep was was not the same. My sleep pattern was not the same, which is affecting my health, which was affecting just my day-to-day operating. And so I'm a real advocate for seeking a mental health professional when you need that. And I was on a conference call, a Zoom meeting every Monday. The mayor of Detroit and there's neighborhood directors have a meeting to inform the community about what's happening in our government. And the health department always shows up to talk about various public health issues, COVID, obviously. But there was someone on the line today who was a clinical social worker, and she talked about various ways that you can um, go into meditation. She even said journaling. If you don't reach out to a mental health professional, start journaling or write yourself a letter and tear it up, throw it away, shred it, burn it, after you've gotten it out. But again, that's another form of talk therapy. And she really talked a lot about meditating. And so, yes, there's prayer, but there's also meditation. And she talked about distancing yourself from social media that so many people are really, really involved with, and that's depressing a lot of people. So sometimes you just need the solitude of yourself and your own mind, your own thoughts, so that you can, readjust yourself. I think we all
Well,
need it from time to time.
well, I'm going to always put put a prayer at the top of the list of therapy, but I'm joining you in saying it's no shame to reach out to a mental health professional or a mental health method that will help you through a depression or anything that could lead to the ultimate sadness of suicide. Let me just run down the list of some prominent Black Americans that died in the last 90 days. I want to say from your old stomping grounds, suburb of the district. The mayor of Hyattsville, Maryland, committed tragic suicide a few weeks ago, about 8 weeks ago, Kevin Ward. And we all know of the harsh suicide form Miss USA, Chelsea Curse did, 30 years old, jumped from one of the apartments in New York City. And then I didn't know about this when the Walking Dead star Moses Mosley, 33 years old, committed suicide. And I think a lot of us knew about, and this was a hard one, and our heart goes out to Regina King, her 26-year-old son, after celebrating a birthday and time with his mother and projecting positively into the future, committed suicide at age 26. And one of the things the psychiatrists are saying is more prominent in the Black community as to why we don't reach out to help or other methods. A lot of it is religious pressure, that we don't go to these things. And I want to, as a practicing spiritual practitioner, I want to tell you everything that God puts on this planet that's ethical or spiritual or righteous. And certainly he has trained therapists and methods of therapy. Utilize it. Don't become that statistic that leaves your family in pain, in shame, in hurt, in bewilderment, and in anger. I mean, many of us have, and I'll sign up on that. Many of us have lost loved ones, and it's left us in a state of anger that you left me. Why? And that's almost asinine, because unless it was a suicide, they didn't leave. But we're just saying that these are reasons. And so they're saying that in our community particularly, it's seen as a weakness to reach out for help. And I'll just say it, that's a tool and trick of the enemy if a person feels that way or thinks that way instead of getting the needed help. We know Kurt Cobain. I'm just thinking of some of the great entertainers. And it kind of leads Jane into this. I was thinking about this the other day. We lost Elvis. We lost Janis Joplin. I'm dating myself. Jimi Hendrix, and more recently Michael, Prince, Whitney, to drug abuse, basically. And we would never think that people that are so immensely gifted and talented will fall prey to these things. But at the end of the day, sis, we're just flesh and blood. And so reach out to any help. We're saying that to everybody out there, those man, reach out to any help for anything that encompasses you, whether it's waking you up at 4 o'clock in the morning, whether it's just dominating your every thought that you can't go through your regular routine of life because you're dominated by sadness or by a traumatic situation. There's help available. Please get the help that's available for
Yeah.
any of these reasons. And
Yeah, I think so much of that is false pride that people have that when they don't reach out. I did not know Mayor Kevin Ward of Hyattsville. I did live in a city at one point in Maryland, which was kind of under the umbrella of Hyattsville, but it had its own charter. So I know Hyattsville very, very well. I used to go to the Hyattsville, Maryland library. They had a fantastic library, much larger than the library in my little 2,000 resident town, if you will. And no one knows what he may have been going through. Heavyweight. He had been on the city council, twice elected. He was interim mayor. He was a father, a grandfather, and a husband. But a lot of times, even those people closest to you don't know what's going on. I'll recount a person. This was nearly 30 years ago. A guy that I was dating, and unbeknownst to me, he used drugs. I did not know it. And it turned out one evening we were watching the game, football, Monday night, and at his place. And typically we would order, pizza or Chinese food. His roommate was there, and he says, "Well, I'm gonna go pick it up to be faster than waiting for delivery because everyone's getting delivery." Okay, fine. Well, he left and never came back. And he took my car keys and it didn't come back. And so the game was over. The roommate went to bed, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And this is before we had cell phones. This was the late 80s. And I went out to the parking lot to go to my car. My car is gone. And so I'm looking for, rummaging through my purse, and my keys are gone, which was a valet key. I had my key for my house because I keep them on separate rings because I'd always valet park my car. And that's when I realized, oh my God, my car's been stolen, or did he take my car? Well, it ended up that he took my car. Don't know why. Maybe he didn't have gas because he had his own car. But I went back into the apartment complex. The roommate rang me in, buzzed me in. And I said, it seems as though, this person took my car. And he's like, yeah, he gets like that sometimes. I'm like, what do you mean? And he says, well, he does coke. And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. And so, long story short, I ended up taking a cab home, which was about 20 miles back into DC, into Washington, DC. And because he lived out in Maryland, I'm sorry, out in Virginia. And the next day, he called me, and I told him just bring it to my office and the guys will valet it. And that was that. Never saw him again. But he had an undercover drug addiction. And this was a fully functioning person, professional, educated, well educated by our standards, but something he wasn't able to cope with. And stealing my car to go and fuel his addiction let me know what was going on. And I did say you need to go get some help for that, but I can't have any further involvement with you. So you just never know what people are going through. I don't know if it was pressures of the job. I don't know what it was, but I had an experience with someone who had a drug addiction, and it turned out, interestingly for me, I'll say that there's even more parts to that story, which there always is. However, we never know, and a lot of times people put on a mask during the day, at work, to family, but they're really going through something. And from what I've heard, I have a good friend from college that is a psychologist. In fact, he is a pastor, he's a minister, and he also is a psychologist, PhD. And he's been called upon to counsel the children of Oxford, Michigan, which is about 45, 50 miles outside of Detroit, where there was a mass shooting back in November, killed four teenagers in the high school. And he doesn't talk to me about any of those children and their situations, but broadly about a lot of situations. And he just said there are a lot of people in our community who are Black who need therapy, but they don't reach out. And so he's definitely an evangelist for that, because that is his profession, his avocation. And it's something that, you know there's so many resources available, free and anonymous, even if you want that. So, folks, if you're having an issue, reach out and get some assistance before something bad happens to you, to your mind, and to your body and soul.
We may end up bringing some therapists on and doing a show on this whole topic. I had a tragic situation when I was a kid, but I'm in the interest of time, I'll let that slide. We're gonna come back after the break, and we're gonna tonight's Dang Dog shout out. Are you serious? Whatever it is, it's gonna lead into our next topic. Let's hear a word from our sponsors now. Dialogue for us now, going on year 2, year 3 actually. After this year, they do the dialogue for us, and how excited this is we'll be heading on year 2. How excited we are and appreciative of the great job that they do for us. Tonight, it's a combination. It's a combination of we're going to do a shout out, and we're going to introduce a new segment tonight that will do our midway point tonight. Tonight is a shout out to Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson for her straight out perseverance. She persevered as an African American sister, a double minority in American society. And at our age, that's not an easy thing to do. She's a double graduate of Harvard University. She served as a public defender. She wanted to bring that perspective onto the bench. She served ultimately as the D.C. Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia, and she has now been confirmed by the United States Senate as Joe Biden's appointment to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And you and I know that all of these political institutions, the three branches of government, beginning the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, we can all point out to the flaws in them. But we're shouting this sister out because she paved the way. She did what she needed to do. She put herself in a position, and when the opportunity came, time and opportunity met with her preparation and her experience and her passion, and she was selected. And I must say, she overcame the most outright, arduous, incomprehensible, the craziest confirmation process that we have seen of all of them. So to you, soon-to-be Justice Jackson, from the dialogue, is shout out to you. You stand as an image for many of our sisters of all colors, creeds, and kinds. We appreciate you putting yourself in this position. Tonight, we're also going to introduce, right along with the shout out to her, we're going to introduce a new segment, and it's called Boo! Boo to you, Lindsey Graham. You are the eternal hypocrite of the world. Apparently, you were going to be all right if the president had nominated the double minority from your state, but because it wasn't, you more than micro picked on this sister. And you know what? I hate to think what would happen if you didn't have the protection you have, because what you did to her was just horrible, horrific. Boo to you, Lindsey Graham. You continue to be not only a hypocrite, but you showed yourself last week, along with your counterpart, to be not only a hypocrite, but also you proved to be, along with Rand Paul, you proved yourself to be a coward. Why a coward? Well, after it was apparent that soon-to-be Justice Brown was going to be confirmed, you failed to show up for the vote. You voted from a courtroom closet, Jan. That's where he voted from. I think that might have been appropriate for Lindsey Graham also. How did he do it? He took his tie off. He noticed there's a decorum in the United States Senate that you can't come without being dressed in a particular fashion. So he took his tie off. He and Rand Paul both said that they lost their ties, and so they ended up voting remotely, voting down against soon-to-be Justice Brown. Boo to you. You're not the standard for what your office holds. We know that this is not even a question of politics. This is a question of character. This is a question of manhood. And you proved to be the worst kind by not even showing up. And along with your counterparts who at least had the decency to stand up for a vote, even though they couldn't take the hurrahs and the celebration after soon-to-be Justice Brown was confirmed, and they walked out. Most unprecedented. You can say what you want to say about the Democratic Party, but there's not a precedent for seeing them do that. And what you two hypocrites, cowards, did. Well, if this was a Joy Reid show tonight, we would say it like this: you're the absolute worst. Jan, had to get that in. That was from my friend Griff, who told me we've been letting them slide lately. I know you had a concern about President Biden. You didn't think this reached the apex of what he owes the communities that supported him. I want to say this before you do a take on that. He held a news conference today where at least we have a president who is taking on the issue of gun violence in this nation. I sat back and saw President Obama tears. I saw him cry after the crazy mass shootings that took place in schools, and he thought that if there's a word, his momentum could be cashed in on to do something about it. And because of the influence of the NRA and other gun lobbyists, it was unable to get done. And at least, and I think it was more than token, at least today he reached out and did something. And I think it's more than symbolic. It's a start. What's your take on what happened last week in Justice Brown's nomination to the court? Now the SCOTUS is no longer a white male-dominated entity.
Well, the United States Supreme Court, there are a lot of things to be conflicted about as a Black person in this country. And so I give my hats off. All congratulations are warranted. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson was eminently qualified. Former President Obama set her on that path by appointing her to her first nomination while he was president, which led to her second nomination and confirmation and third. And so she, as we know, is the most qualified jurist to be nominated at that point in time. She has more experience than any of the other jurists at that point in time when they were nominated. And so my take on it is, I'm very glad, I'm very happy for her, but in all actuality, nothing is going to change in the immediacy. Our lives of Black people in particular in this country, are not going to change tomorrow, next week, or within the next 5 years because a person, a Black woman, was nominated and confirmed and will soon sit on the Supreme Court. And I want people to understand, as Dozell mentioned, that I lived in Washington. Well, I did more than live in Washington for over 30 years. I worked in the legislative arena. I worked in the United States Senate for a Michigan member of the Senate. I worked in the United States Congress in the House of Representatives for two iconic members of Congress, Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, as well as Congressman John Conyers. And I worked for Senator Donald Regal, who was the Michigan senior senator at that time. I've been a lobbyist for major industries, commercial building and public broadcasting. So I know that arena very well as a registered lobbyist before the United States Congress, with the ability to actually negotiate with members on the Hill. And that's why I say nothing's going to change for us in the immediacy. The composition of the Supreme Court has a very heavy Republican conservative ideology. So one Black person who is a Democrat, possibly leaning liberal, is not going to make any changes. And so for me, outside of congratulating this woman, it is a distraction. And I believe that we need to continue to be very vigilant in our demands. And I don't say requests, but I say demands, because as Frederick Douglass said nearly 200 years ago, power concedes nothing without a demand. And so our demands should continue to be for racial justice, for economic justice and economic parity, for reparations for African Americans descended of enslaved Africans and Black Americans born here. Congratulations are in order. It is historic. The time had more than come for a Black woman to be seated on the highest court in the nation. She was on the highest court in Washington, D.C. However, and she was more than qualified, but this nomination is not enough for me to be inspired, given it has taken 233 years of this country's history with the Supreme Court to have a Black woman on the court. And this President Biden, only nominated a Black woman because he had to be reminded of his campaign promise. And so again, Black Americans need to hold every elected official accountable, hold Senator Lindsey Graham accountable for his unstatesmanly behavior after the nomination confirmation vote. It was unstatesmanly for him to behave in that manner, and he definitely knows better. His choice, which was a South Carolina jurist, was not selected, but this person is eminently qualified, and his behavior is really it's really horrible for him to have behaved in that manner. But I want us collectively as Black people to continue to demand what it is that we should get, because the way I see it, and from where I stand, having worked in that arena, having Vice President Kamala Harris, who is one of my sorority sisters, and now a Black woman on this who will go to the Supreme Court, is window dressing on the set. I want for all Black Americans descended of enslaved people reparations, repair us for the wage theft of our ancestors and all of the horrific things that came out of racism, segregation, Jim Crow, lynching, etc., de jure and de facto. So I'm not dancing in the streets, because there's more to be done. And this president can afford to be bold. And I keep saying, if you want me to be dancing in the street, President Biden, I say to you, enact and establish the Reparations Commission for African Americans, so the study can be done within the 1 year time that executive order is establishing that commission, just like the other commissions that he's established by executive order. Show me the money, because I still want my 40 acres and a mule in today's terms.
Jen, how unfair is it to, I thought one of the most harshest criticism of President Obama was, what has he done for Black America when he was president? And my contention I always countered that by saying, he is not the president of Black America, he is the president of America. And whereas he is an African American, and he obviously is sensitive to our causes, our concerns, our needs, there was a greater concern. You had mass shootings that kind of dominated his tenure in schools. One of them was well, let's see. No, actually, this occurred on this other guy's tenure. Uh, when the Stroman Douglas right down here, and I'll never forget that day seeing the police cars screaming out there, and the texts that were going on back and forth between educated colleagues of mine about, we've heard there's been a shooting. We had no idea. Many of our chins dropped that night on CNN when we learned that 17 souls, 17 lives perished in that shooting. But he had that. He had some international crisis. This president comes in after one of the most, I don't know, I don't want to offend any of our dear right-wing viewers, but it came in under one of the most unaccomplished presidencies, and one that race baited and did all of these things. And I think just bringing a measure of healing to the nation, particularly in the midst of George Floyd and a pandemic and all of these things. And I think President Biden is, and I know we won't see eye to eye on this, I think he's taking a harsh hit somewhat unfairly. I think to charge him and I know when we had a show that talked about reparations, we said it had to be done at some point. It had to have a starting point. But my personal feeling is that there's right now there may be greater fish to fry. I know politically it would be suicide for him. And I just appreciate the fact, and I'm gonna throw this out here. I know it's not going to be popular with everybody. I appreciate the fact that he held on to his pledge from the Supreme Court. He does have an African Asian sister, the first female vice president. That's really breaking a glass ceiling. And he also pushed hard for the John Lewis Voter Rights Act. He just didn't have the support of two Democratic senators who could have delivered that. So I think with the job of healing this nation and dealing with some of the craziness that we endured 6 years ago or 4 years ago, I think that I don't know. I choose to celebrate it because I think it's a step in the right direction. I didn't vote for, obviously, George Herbert Walker Bush, but I liked him. I liked he looked for a kind of gentler nation after the guy who served 8 years in front of him. But when I saw him nominate Festus to the Supreme Court, I said, man, all the cool points you had, we just went out the door. And that guy, we could talk about that right now.
Well, let me jump in here. As you know, I was a appointee during the President Obama's administration. I worked for the U.S. Department of Commerce and the Census Bureau. And I live in America, and I'm supposed to be able to have freedom of speech and be able to be critical. And so when you talk about President Obama, let's talk about, I don't see it the way that you just defined it, okay? I see that there could have been more done for African Americans under his tenure. I see that there could have been more done under President Clinton's tenure. So let me just walk you back to, let's say, 1989. And I'm gonna just throw back to even 1983. In 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated, killed for being a drum major for the United States to have racial healing. So let's start there. 1963, we had the March on Washington. We had the first March on racial justice in Detroit, Michigan. It was the dress rehearsal for the August March in Washington, D.C. And let's then move to 1968. Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King said, beware the liberal white Democrat. And I want you to remember that. Beware the liberal white Democrat, because right now that's who's holding us back. 1983, after 15 years, Congressman John Conyers, my former boss, he introduced the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday bill. Who signed that into law? Ronald Reagan. Okay. Then who did we have? We had, after Reagan, we went into two terms, 8 years of Bush. Okay.
Term of Bush. Clinton beat him Clinton defeated him after his first term.
Well, it was Bush and then Clinton and then Bush and then Obama and then Trump and then here we are. So let me just walk through the liberal and the moderate Democrats and what did they really do for us. When we try to hold up that one presidency. And I'm going to talk specifically about racial justice issues. And so reparations, once again, is a bill that I think that we should really be talking about. We don't talk about it enough, not in the Black media and certainly not in the white media in the United States. And so I had the awesome honor to work on that legislation, the first HR 40, which was actually Bill 3745. We introduced that, reparations for African Americans, November 20th, 1989. Okay. Reagan was in Bush was in the White House. Okay. And then we go to Clinton. Clinton did nothing under reparations. Then we went back to Republican. Well, nothing happened there. Then we go to Democrat, Obama. Nothing happened there, and he could have established it as a commission under executive order. Then we went to a Republican. Okay, we knew nothing was going to happen there, but miraculously, I don't even know who was asking for it. We got Juneteenth Day. Okay, so now we've got Juneteenth Day. And so that's effectively an acknowledgement of enslavement and actually the white Americans who were enslavers who kept Black people enslaved in southern states much longer than the Emancipation Proclamation had freed enslaved people. And now we're, back to a moderate liberal Democrat. Still hasn't done anything on the reparations issue. So who's holding us back? We've had Democrats in my lifetime since that legislation, HR 40, reparations for African Americans, was introduced, and the most that it's gotten is out of the Judiciary Committee. There was a hearing, and so it needs to go to the floor. Hasn't gone to the floor. We only have 8 months left in this congressional session. This is the 117th congressional session. Every congressional session is 2 years. We introduced that in the 101st congressional session in 1989. This session will be over effectively in December of this year, technically January 3rd, when the new Congress is sworn in. So that is why I'm saying this president should and can. He could establish the commission to study how reparations could be dispersed to African Americans descended of enslaved people tomorrow. All they have to do is flip the language in the HR 40 and turn it into an executive order, and it could be signed, and the work can be done. The research could be done, and it would be irrefutable. I'd like to present a clip to you for a future show for one of my homeboys, Ed Gordon, who I was in high school with in Detroit, who interviewed President Biden during the campaign trails of 2020. And Ed Gordon asked him specifically, where do you stand on reparations? And he did a song and a dance. And then he said, well, I need to see, I need to be informed. I need to be sold on reparations. And the only way that I could, this was candidate Biden at that time speaking, the only way that he could support reparations for African Americans is if Native Americans were included. That showed me right then and there how ignorant he was to the history of the Black American descendant of Africans enslaved in the United States, that you would want to tack on to legislation Native Americans who have their own history of disenfranchisement, land being taken. Black people never got the land they were promised. Once again, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, beware the liberal, the moderate, white Democrat. And I'm seeing that come to pass. And I'm going to say 1968 was an incredible year because who said it? James Brown was the artist. The album was Sex Machine. The song was I Don't Need Nobody to Give Me Nothing. Open the door, I'll let myself in. That's all we're asking. Open the door. Establish this reparations commission so that we can get the work done, so it will be irrefutable, all fact-based. What happened, who did it, and who should benefit from it.
So I want to. We got to leave it here now, and I hate to leave it in the midst of this conversation. We're going to come back and revisit the whole issue of reparations. And but since you mentioned that quote by the president, um, I have and I'm as black as anybody can be, inward. My skin may not be as dark, but I'm as black as that can be inward. But I have a personal affinity for what Native Americans in this nation have gone through, and I don't know if I disagree with that statement on his part, because maybe he sees a way that it can get tied in with more momentum. But we got to hold that for now, because time has jumped all over us and beat us upside the head. But I want to just throw this one question out from Toya Williams, and she asks, is it possible to rewrite the Constitution so that it can include blacks? Jan, can you take a minute and answer that?
Well, I'm sitting here in my living room, and I am sitting under a painting by Michael Brown, who many people might remember. The painting became the poster for the Million Man March. You might remember that, Dozell, because you were there. And it's called Stars and Stripes, and it's the picture of an enslaved man whose back has lots of whips and keloided skin from all of the whip marks. And the way that the artist put the whip marks was in the image of the Stars and Stripes, the American flag. And it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Let's stop right there. Black people were not included in the United States Constitution. We were not considered people. We were not considered humans. We were considered the same as a shovel, a plow, or a rake. We were property. We were inventoried, just like a plow, a rake, or a shovel. So the question, is it possible to rewrite the Constitution so that includes Black people? And I'm going to skip back. Native Americans were not considered citizens of the United States at the founding of this country. Their land was confiscated from them. They were pushed back onto reservations. Treaties that were written were not upheld. And you talk about suicide. There was a lot of suicide within the Native American indigenous people population, because they, just what happened, what just happened to us.
Right.
So it could be rewritten, but I rather doubt that it ever will. And therein lies the perplexity of the Black American, because we were not considered in the writing of the United States Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. And in fact, Chief Justice Tanner within the Supreme Court, in the Dred Scott case, stated that Black people were never considered to be citizens or humans in the Constitution. So the Constitution, I've taken a pledge and oath to it many times during my government service, but it's always conflicting, because that document did not include me and my ancestors in it, and it had to be amended. And we're even now looking for a bill to ensure our voting rights, because Dozell, us being cousins, our grandparents were in their 60s when they became full citizens of the United States by being allowed to vote, and that's the 1965 Voting Rights Act. My parents were in their 30s when they became full citizens of this country in 1965, and already had 3 children. So, let's go back to school, but let's school ourselves on the real history and not his story.
We got to leave it right here. Jan, thanks for stopping by tonight. We explored we scratched the surface on some things that we really want to delve more into, and that's the issue of suicide. I don't think that I'm emotionally and mentally capable of dealing with that issue. If in fact that is a part of what has happened in view of what all that has happened over the last 6 weeks. But that's a show that we will do in the future. We got to revisit the whole issue of reparations, and what do we expect out of our political leaders? What do we expect of this nation and its treatment of us? And what can we do to break the ceiling? Bum Phillips says, we came up the sidewalk, we knocked on the door. This year we're going to crack the door down. Where do we go from here? Next week, Dialogue with Dozell. We're going to look at how much fun it can be to plan and execute a road trip. We're going to look at destinations. We're going to look at the planning. We're going to look at post return from trips, how to document it, how to enjoy it. We want to have a nice, fun show on next week. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have some travel experts on. Thank you, Jan. Thank you so much for coming at the 11th hour. And to our producers, GoGeekCreations.com, just hats off to you. And again, congratulations for the accomplishment. We want to set her up as an example of that you can succeed. And it does take help. It takes more than a village to get us to where we need to be in this nation. God bless. We'll see you next Monday night, 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock sharp next week. Dialogue with Dozell. Bless you. See you, Jan. Thank you so much.